paper called versus
Jeszcze sobie pozwolę
Title of my
dodać
speech is versus parametricism. I organize my intervention in some parts. We starting from the definition of the notion of parameter. After we face the problem of opera aperta in Umberto Eco thinking and the partecipationism, after the notion of post-human and the dehumanizing power of technology, and go to parametric turn, and in the ending the project as system of choice about forms. What is a parameter? A parameter in general is a term of reference, is a criterion of judgment or a norm. Parameter refers back to the Greek metron, measures, within the addition of the prefix para corresponding to the preposition para, that means at, near, besides, beyond, with the second meaning of aching, approaching, flanking. Parameter, from which parametric derives. Therefore, although it refers to the measurement, it does not coincide with it, but comes close to it, approximates it, goes alongside it, in fact determining the dual condition of measure and para-measure, and also define a term of references against which to compare a given action of artifact. Coming to more appropriate architectural lexicon, the notion of parameters is opposed to that of symmetrical, another compound of metron with the prefix sign, and form a begin almost a measures, a kind of measurement, while the latter is literally with measures. Plato reminds us in the Philebus that measures and symmetry are everywhere and always beauty and virtue. For Plato, who condemns the mimetic art in the textbooks of the Republic, architecture is ultimately distinct from and superior to them in depth. The art of building which make use of many measurements and instruments. They believe that this very fact that provides it with much precision makes in the most technical of most science. The Athenian philosopher therefore remains the architecture precise because it pertains to the measurement and the techniques understood as a skill and not to the parameasurement variability, but to the deep and precise knowledge that it induces among other science. If, on the other hand, we look at the term parameter in mathematics, it designates a constant approaching in equation of analytical function and describes the curve or surface, for instance. Coming to architecture, for Luigi Moretti, Italian architect, one of the forerunners of the parametric method applied to the architecture, we must seek solutions centered on the quantifiable parameters of the phenomena that cause the function for which we seek the parameter forms, which consequently, singularly, and in their interrelationship, which are also quantifiable, establish the limits within which The forms that those functions fulfill are identified and designed. The parameters and their interrelationship thus become the expression, the code of the new architectural language, the structure in the original and rigorous sense of the word, defining the form that those functions fulfill. The determination of the parameters and their interrelationship must be aided by the most up-to-date techniques and instruments of scientific thought, particularly mathematical logic or operational research and the computers, especially the latter because of the possibility they offer of expressing the probable solution of the parameters values and their relationship in self-correcting cyclic science. To the development of this approach and to new method and theory specified in these schemes and verified in its first and I would say exalting results, I give the name, for instance, parametric architecture. This is quotation by Moretti. If the parameter inherent related to movement in terms of alteration, the algorithm with which it can be associated related to a procedure that solves the calculation of a given problem or the analysis of a phenomenon. Algorithm named after the Persian Arabic mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, makes use of the equation of two numerical parameters confirmed by Latin attraction arithmus, derived from the Greek arithmos, which refers to the notion of number. What is opera aperta and partecipazionism? In what sense are linked with the question of parametricism? The developing characteristic can but refers to the hypothesis of an open works, formulated by Umberto Eco in 1962 in his well-known book Opera Aperta. According to this Emotian, on an open work would be a proposal of a field of interpretative possibility, a configuration of stimuli, endowed with a substantial indeterminacy, so that the user is induced to a series of readings that are always variable, a constellation of elements that lend themselves to different reciprocal relations. And again, these new works consist not in a closed and defined message, not in an univocally organized form, but in a possibility of various organization, construed to the initiative of the interpreter, and therefore present themselves not as finished works, but as an open works, which are completed by the interpreter at the same time as he uses them. This is the quotation by Eco. This mobility of the work, which cannot be defined by the author, but is open for interpretation, on one hand denies the fitnesses of the ergon of the works, but on the other hand opens up to continuous deformation through the multiply hermeneusis transgression of the form, which, far from being intentionality, constructed as a sensitive manifestation of idea, as in quotation by Hegel, become iridescent, shapeless, and always available for a supervision of underlying reason and motives, starting from the request of the user or the client customer, and never for the creator. This structural and sought-after ambiguity and not consciousness of the work reference in many ways is linked to a certain idea of bottom-up participationism, according to which from Giancarlo De Carlo thinking. He says, a work of defining the participationism architecture, a work of architecture in addition to improving the material condition of its recipient, must be supported for their need to communicate by representing themselves. Therefore, the structure of the work must be designed in such a way as to allow continuous adaptation and always new transformation, which can be sustained with the project as a true extension of it. A project that, therefore, not only throws forward, but also admit addition, correction, amendments, rhizomatic proliferation, depending on the use of changing needs. However, it should be noted that Giancarlo De Carlo himself recognized that the use had no influence on the project produced. Indeed, the object of it is considered all the more successful the more it can resist to subversions of the use. So, if it is not used, can determine modification, alteration to the successful work, then what should induce these dynamics and mobile openings of the works? Perhaps the free interpretation or the commutative combination a la Chomsky, which are ultimately nothing more than recursively or properly parametric variation of an autological nature. Following Antonio Monessiroli, he argued with regard to Opera Aperta that this book essentially contains a theorem which somehow fuels disengagement. In Opera Aperta, according to Monessiroli, Umberto Eco argues that the work of art cannot have an affirmative character, and that the main characteristic of art, which is admitted by all, lies in its ambiguity. The idea that a work of art is valid if it contains a true and is opposite. That is, it follows for different interpretation and ultimately, if it's not a simple affirmative work, has had many followers. For as far as architecture is connected, the architecture is a necessary, a constructive message, a positive message, to use the word most suitable for us, for the man. But we stay now in the time of post-human. What is post-human? We have to quote Alberto Cuomo, what is emeritus of University of Naples. According Cuomo, the parametric is only a technique in architecture, is exaltation supported by ineffective ideologies on the biomorphic, the post-human, with pistol pulls on the alleged salvation of the planet. Only demonstrate cultural paucity and a substantial inability to design. On the other hand, those was the program so-called parametricism, rhino, grasshopper, etc., only ever produce the same design, showing subject as they are the computer, imaginative sterility, and the absolute lack of critical sense. This is quotation by Alberto Cuomo. The post tracked a violent controversy between those who are adherent to such a critical stance against the instrumentality of techniques and those, especially the younger ones, the youth, foresaw this technology, which, however, always imply an ideology as a useful, operational, creative tool capable to revolutionizing the usual method of architectural design, opening up new, unpredicted, and unprecedented expressive possibility through the procedural modeling. The variational and pseudo-generative possibility allowed by visual algorithms or the augmented reality simulation connected to the virtualized and derealizing production of complex and multi-curved shapeless form are not, strictly speaking, architecture, understood as an intelligible mode of a formal order, but only a substitute mode, a quick device to make those constructs usable and, or worse, to reduce the art of building to simple images alone. Those two rely solely on modeling tools and the far-fetched possibility of calculation and their apparent freedom, which in the final analysis is a submission to the domain with the delusion of a maintained control, in fact renounce to the imagination of forms, their prevision with the eyes of the mind, and bet by means of a rehearsal or recursive games on the illusory autopoiesis of forms. But the forms they provide of the sense and a meaning to be represented and reduced to a pure play of syntax or complex or folded geometries, starting from the Jacques Deleuze way of thinking, which ultimately become banally mimetically of the natural form, are reduced to onanistic and sterile formalism without any control, balance, or any proportion. An automatic game or fluid, unstoppable, and programmatically unrestrained writing. Now, philogenesis sine nulla mensura without measure. The humanizing power of technology. The humanizing power, which deludes many of us with a magnificent progressive facts, with previous unexplored possibility, conceals a distance, a dramatic estrangement with architecture itself and this is millenary foundation. The art of building ministers and dominates techniques and, by definition, cannot be its servant or servants. The technique that these techniques are seduced by the productive and self-constructive illusion permitted and stimulated the digital and visual scripting tools that take one progressive appearances and are capable of unprecedented performance that were impossible before this. And in the end, a merge refuge, a pseudo-protection, a cave, or a cage that isn't anything else than a cage. The absent mid-depth and the reductive phrase of doing, of practice, of that which must serve the professional market, tightens the screw of this trap ever more praxis without a critical foundation and a conscious, not observational judgment on the world and its contradiction, it's only heterodirector performance, banal commodification, authentic dehumanization. No culture, no vision, only instrumental euphoria, verbal violence to conceal an evident inconsistency and an argumentative incapacity. The assertion, the statement that one cannot even talk about a certain technique simple because one does not know how to use it is logically inconsistent and not defendable. Cultural, intellectual equipment allows those who possess it, when it's broad and layered, to be able to argue about any aspects of reality, including rhinoceros, grasshopper, or any other animals ready to pounce or bite. I point out that the term grasshopper also refers to a famous cocktail, and as a well-known for Miss Van der Rohe, architecture is not and in no way can be a martini cocktail. It's not mixing, not amalgamation. It's not a game of changing a parametric and let's see what happens. The parametric tools. The parametrics, which, as we have seen, originated from mathematical acquisition, from Lagrange, for example, and until Gross and some MIT research, up the theorization made by Patrick Schumacher with his manifesto, according to which parametricism would even be a new style, a style that would aim in waiting to make itself eponymous with complexity, to overcome in one stroke modernism, postmodernism, and deconstructivism itself, on which it is but a mere evolution or involution. Parametrics, taken as an ideology or as a technique, is to large extent the refuge of an incompetent. Of these two, what do know about form, about law of composition, in fact, who speak only of an instrumental technique, not to speak of architecture, but only of techne, not of ends, nor of presupposition, being in fact committed and bound to praxis alone, to the market, to the production of captivating, but in fact aggressive images, of simulacra, of phantasmagorias, and of smooth and glittering involution, very close to the sculpture that have no other goal than to turn themselves into a merchandise to be sold on the altar of the profit. To use any tool of instruments, one must have a stance of an architecture is only far than stains, then one can then select the technical equipment to develop it. In the frequent accusation of inability to govern the recent tools leveled at those who would criticize them, there is never a single statement about what and how, or about what idea architecture parametricism would underlie. In my opinion, there is none, because in the unregulated experimentalism that drives it, the new style, or rather the new ism, in renouncing of a synthetic thought founded on the form exiled from its laws, relies on the mere events, constraints with no predictable outcomes, surprising because by surprise. This apparent because one does not really have an idea of architecture, or because one does not possess planning skills, ideational inventive aptitude, and one thinks that thought are mere surrogate and perniciously dominant tools. As all techniques turn from means into ends, one can overcome hide this obvious inaptitude. The project, finally, have to look as a predictive system of choice about form and their appropriateness, not about arbitrary constraints that then determine the form in a non-predictable manner. The limit of parametricism ultimately consists in relying on a questionable system of requirements, constraints, and parameters as in not being able to determine, except by random, unconscious and unintelligent trials, the final outcome. A system that, with the blunder and the self-generative grammar of shape, does not allow the convenient, adequate, and intelligent form, and for the reason, following Benjamin way of think, capable of generalized reception, in their non-automatic but intentional relationship, to be expressive of the value and the region of the building. In short, we must re-educate people to see with the eyes of the mind as a transcendental condition, knowing and transforming reality through forms. Otherwise, it is a better avoiding the deception of parametricism to crumple sheet of paper, scan them, and three-dimensional model them with CATIA software, as in a joke dealing by a famous American architect. Thank you for your attention.
Też bardzo dziękujemy panu profesorowi.
Thank you very much.